Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of NFL Goal Line Live with Nick Rice and Andrew Goldstein. We apologize for no cool intro music to start off the broadcast, but we have another fantastic presentation. You are live on Spreaker.com's national sports radio station. I am your host, Nick Rice, and I'm alongside Andrew Goldstein. And it's been another fantastic week in the world of sports, including football, where we saw preseason week number 1, and it all started on Friday night with a contest between the Jets and the Lions. The hot topic of the preseason was Geno Smith versus Mark Sanchez. It's been the debate all off season. And Andrew, what was your takeaway from that quarterback battle? That it seemed to be just about dead even by the 5-year pro from USC and the rookie from West Virginia.
Well, I feel like we didn't learn a whole lot on Friday night. Geno Smith didn't really get as many passes as I feel like he would have liked to have, or that Rex Ryan would have liked him to have, because of the unfortunate ankle injury, and thank goodness he's okay and seems like he'll be ready to go for week 2 of the preseason. Sanchez, at this point, you know what you're getting with him. You saw some of the good, him throwing that touchdown to Jeff Cumberland, but also some of the really bad, shaky footwork, that pick six to Ziggy Ansah where he was throwing it to, I'm not sure who he was throwing
it was a screen, quote-unquote, but that really didn't look anything clean at all on that play.
Well, I think what was supposed to happen, it was supposed to be a fullback screen or a tight end screen, but the fullback or tight end got jammed up covering somebody else, so there was nobody to throw it to when Sanchez was looking for it.
I mean,
but still,
by the time you're in your...
know that the right thing to do with that is throw it away.
You throw it away, yeah. So what we're getting right now with Mark Sanchez is a guy who, I mean, not only do you know what you're getting, but you're going to get some pretty average football with Mark Sanchez. Now, Geno Smith, the reason why he isn't running away with this job is the concerns that was evident before the draft. And I think the Jets are in a lose-lose situation. You plug in Mark Sanchez, and you're going to get another season of more interceptions than touchdowns, because he's not he hasn't improved at all from last year. We just haven't seen any more good than bad, and that preseason game really shows it. But Geno Smith was questioned, which is why he wasn't taken in the first round at all, and really shouldn't have been taken in the second, was his leadership roles and how he's been questioned his entire collegiate career about his impact in that locker room. And to be honest, I don't think he's making all that positive of a scene in New York with so much turmoil in that locker room. I don't think Geno Smith is making the situation any better. And if there's any team that deserves to clean house, I think it's the New York Jets, and they do need to start with the man up top. I believe that Rex Ryan, among the quarterback situation, just needs to be flushed out, because none of these QBs have had any sort of positive surrounding around them. The weapons are lethargic, to say the least, for this ball club. They don't have a single wideout that will take this job. It's just all of these threats for the Jets have lost. They have lost so many viable weapons, and they've replaced them with guys that have been paid too much for the lack of production that they've had. And to be honest, I just don't see the Jets winning any more than 4 or 5 games this year. I think, Andrew, you can agree that this is just a below-average ball club that, at the very best, Rex Ryan pulls out 4 or 5 games out of that defense, because offensively it is just an appalling lack of production on that side.
Well, you said about a minute or two ago that the Jets were in a no-win situation. I would argue that they are in a very winnable situation, because next year's draft, sitting at the number 1 pick, is Jadeveon Clowney, probably the most talented pass rusher we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years. So the only way for the Jets to really, quote-unquote, win, to get any positive result out of this season, is actually to suck as badly as possible.
You could say that, but I honestly, I don't like playing for the first overall pick. It shows that, there's a lot more than just adding a pass rusher to that team. Sucking will really help as far as draft position, but drafting another defensive player after what D. Milliner might prove as a very viable number 2 corner. Sheldon Richardson might be a really nice rotational player in that D line. I just don't think adding another pass rusher is going to help this team at all in the coming years.
No, but that's the thing. This isn't just another pass rusher. This is one of the best you've seen in the last 10 or 20 years.
Right, like a J.J. Watt.
Put it this way. Even if you had the best defense that football has ever seen, you would still take Lawrence Taylor if you had the number 1 pick.
Right.
Because he's Lawrence Taylor and you don't pass him up. It's the same thing with Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, I mean, if injuries don't at all creep up on this young man, that he should obviously be in a good situation. But to be honest, I mean, just to prepare Jets fans this season, just brace yourself for a disaster as far as either Geno Smith or Mark Sanchez taking the reins.
There's no need to prepare us. I'm fully prepared. I've committed to NFL Sunday Ticket already. I'm just switching back and forth.
Right. In case that none of you fans know, Andrew Goldstein, a hardcore New York Jets fan who has seen his team go from back-to-back AFC Conference Championship appearances to perhaps one of the, if not the worst combined roster we've ever seen for this coming 2013 season. As far as talent goes, top to bottom, defensively, you'll see a pretty nice performance. I mean, I think that defense will save the Jets out of a lot of games. I'm a fan of what they've put together on that side. And offensively, I just think that talent-wise, obviously the worst in the league, but as a team, I think one of the bottom 5 as far as a team brought together. And I think for the Eagles, too, similar situation offensively now with injuries that have plagued this team. And Michael Vick could be, if he proves like he is a first-round talent like he has done in the past, win under pressure, I think the Eagles will be a viable team at winning possibly 7 or 8 games. But I just think that this is another quarterback battle, Andrew, that may not prove to be all that successful no matter who's under center. It's not like any of these guys will take their team to the next level when, frankly, the Eagles have a lot of work to do on the talent front, starting with that defense.
Well, put it to you this way. In the Eagles quarterback battle with Nick Foles versus Michael Vick, you know the system that Chip Kelly wants to put in. You saw what he did at Oregon. He wants to run a lot. He wants players going no huddle, running up to the line of scrimmage. And that starts with a very mobile quarterback. Somebody who can take the ball out of any formation and run for a nice 5 or 6 yard gain and make the defense really think about overcommitting to one guy. Now, you look at the 2 guys that they have as their choices right now. Have you seen any quarterback move slower than Nick Foles?
Peyton Manning at this point. Yeah, it's Michael Vick, barring injuries, job to just flat out lose, because right now he's the heavy favorite for winning that position. But as far as Nick Foles is concerned, he's a solid backup just in the beginning of his prime years for Philadelphia. But I think either way, Andrew, do you see any more than 6 or 7 games out of Philadelphia this year?
I don't, but to be perfectly honest, there's nothing really wrong with that. I feel like this is a team that is moving in the right direction. They made some smart defensive pickups.
Yeah, and Lane Johnson, guys, just so you know, may be one of the top 5 tackles in the coming years. He's a very solid pickup at number 4 for the Eagles.
Yeah, ran an insane 40 time, has the highest 0 to 60 speed of any offensive lineman in recent memory, which is very important because often offensive linemen have to run 10 yards in quick succession. They have to shed their blocks and get to that second level, and Lane Johnson might already be able to do that better than most, if not all, starting tackles in the league. So he was really the one guy in this draft that stood out to me. And the Eagles got him. They got Connor Barwin and Kerry Williams this offseason. Mm-hmm. They obviously don't have the big pieces, but you've got to start somewhere, and the Eagles started by building a nice little infrastructure for which they can improve upon over the next couple of seasons, and I feel like that was the right move.
I think if they fix up their tight end and receiver situation, if they create some targets for a quarterback who they may take in the next coming years via the draft or free agency, I think this is a team that can, in the coming years, be a consistent playoff contender yet again. Because not many remember, but just a few years ago, Philadelphia was year in and year out battling for the top of the NFC East. I mean, I believe just 2 years ago, they won that division. So it's not a far-fetched statement to look at the Eagles as a playoff contender again in the coming years. Similar situation in the same division with Washington, but we do have drama at the nation's capital. Andrew, what has happened with the head coach-quarterback relationship? It's been very tumultuous in the coming weeks with Robert Griffin and Mike Shanahan serving blows for blows as far as the injury is concerned coming back in the preseason.
Well, I feel like this whole Shanahan versus RG3 thing has been blown out of proportion. Look, RG3's a player. He's going to err on the side of playing if he's at all physically able to do so because he wants to play. He feels like he should. And Shanahan is a coach, and he's going to do what coaches usually do, which is err on the side of caution and look at the bigger picture. Ultimately, neither side's going to be able to convince the other that they're right, and I feel like RG3 is going to get to play in a couple of weeks anyways. So they're both working for the same goal. They both have the same micro goal of getting RG3 back to 100% so that the Redskins can go out and win games. I just feel like they have a different approach on how to do that, and I don't think it's anything near what the media is blowing it up into. This isn't the second coming of John Elway versus Dan Reeves. This is just a quarterback and a coach who have a good-natured disagreement about playing time in the preseason.
Well, if there's any man who has gone through some sort of a relationship, you know that the key to building a long-term, what looks for the Washington Redskins to being a decade or even longer of a relationship between the quarterback and the coach, if Shanahan is still around, is compromise. And I think that the Redskins may be doing a good thing, erring on the side of caution, but I do believe that you may ruin Robert Griffin's psyche if you indeed keep him out for this long of a time. He's ready to go right now. He has the lion is in the cage and it's ready to attack. And to be honest, I think the Redskins may do some harm throwing him in with all the Bears week 1 when I believe the Redskins face a division opponent. So in my mind, I think, yeah, they do indeed need they do need to soften the blow for week 1. I just think that maybe a week 3 or week 4 preseason appearance may do the trick.
But I don't think it's going to do RG3 any harm to sit out. I mean, if he has a psyche that's so delicate that it can be damaged by a couple weeks of preseason play missed, then he should really consider another line of work. I don't think he has that delicate of a mindset. I feel like maybe RG3 might be frustrated, a little bit resentful for the time being, but ultimately, by week 1, by week 2, he's going to forget about this.
Absolutely. We're facing a question here on the comment board of the National Sports NFL Goal Line Live. Again, you can contact us through that comment board on Spreaker.com along with our cell phone. It's 951-515-4552. Question so far through the first 15 minutes has been who's winning that NFC East, and they wonder if the Eagles are at all a contender. I believe Philadelphia can contend for 7 or 8 wins, but not the division title. I think it's still Washington's division to lose, and if the Giants don't make some big plays on that offensive line, I think that this is yet another season where it could come down week 16 or week 17, where the Redskins, talent-wise, are just a better team.
Well, here's a thought. What about Dallas? Why couldn't they be the division winner?
I just don't believe in... First of all, they haven't really added much through the offseason. I think that their first-round pick, Frederick, has been a terrible pickup. I just don't see him being a viable option under center. But I do think that the the Cowboys will always be around 500. I just don't see this team being a squad that can put up 10 wins and contend with that division for the entire year with all the drama surrounding Big D. And to be quite honest with you, Jason Garrett is one of those coaches who is flat mediocre. I just don't see him being a guy who can rise up the talent, especially when there hasn't been a lot more extra production being put into that locker room.
Well, here's my counter argument. We don't really know what's going on with RG3's ACL till he gets back out there. The spread option's going to be a lot more well defended this year because last year was a fad. It caught a lot of people off guard, but now everybody's had a full off season to study it. It should kind of regress back towards the mean. The Giants are always kind of a grab bag. You don't know what you're going to get from them, or come to think of it, from Eli Manning on any given Sunday. The Eagles aren't quite there yet. We can both agree on that. So I don't think that Dallas is a particularly good team, but I don't feel like you need to be a particularly good team to win the NFC East. I mean, do you feel like 9-7 could do it? Because I do. I feel like maybe even 8-8.
Well, it's all up for debate, but I just think that if you want to win, especially late in the year, you have to win at the quarterback position. And I think that the top two teams in the NFC East right now are the Redskins and the Giants based off of the quarterback. And Tony Romo, I mean, you may say it's unfair, but is left in the shuffle because of just the late plays, late in games that cost his team the chance for the playoffs. And I just don't think that they've added enough through free agency and the draft to make that much of an impact for that division next year.
Well,
But I mean, I see what you mean with the Redskins, though, because that injury, I just don't see in the coming years Robert Griffin all of a sudden becoming a 16-game-a-season guy. I just think that the injury, the fact that he is so light and so quick on his feet, and the fact that he has hit a lot more than a guy like Kaepernick or Newton may prove to be the stick in the back that breaks the camel in the coming years, where he just may be injured more and more as the coming years progress.
Well, this actually goes beyond RG3, but look at the Redskins' defense. D'Angelo Hall is their number one cover guy. They have nobody at safety. Explain to me how they cover anybody. How do they get... Who picks up Des Bryant? Who picks up Victor Cruz? Well, apparently nobody, since Victor Cruz torched them for that 70-yard touchdown to come back in the last minute. If you remember that in like week 6 last year. But who's the difference maker on this defense? Can you even point to any? Because I can't.
It just seems like in the NFL, the defense sometimes can get a pass if the offense is relevant enough. You always know that as the Redskins last year shown that they just are a very good run-pass team. Their receiving options, they're pretty deep at wideout, along with Alfred Morris behind the quarterback, a very viable run-pass option. Even though the read option will not be as effective this year for the Redskins, barring the defense, a huge lack of awareness for this coming year, I don't see that happening. I just think that the Redskins may have to go more conventional. But they did a very good job doing that last year because Shanahan adapted his playbook to Robert Griffin last season by calling more runs and lessening the load his rookie season on Robert Griffin. And I think that because the Redskins have such a powerful run game, they can put up some big-time points and keep the football away from that defense. Sure, the D may not be top-notch, but if it doesn't have to play as much as the offense is, I think it won't be that bad. And outside of the NFC East, I think that it looks like the Redskins will play some opponents that just, frankly, you can mark as easy wins for this year.
Well, don't forget, when you say that the Redskins' offense can make up for their defense, that's true, but we're not talking about the 2007 Patriots, or the greatest show on turf. They're not putting up 30 points every game. I mean, we forget that this is a team that I believe was 1-5 at points last year, 1-6, and everybody had written them off. So they were very good on offense. They ranked 4th in the league in points per game. I believe 5th or 6th in the league in yards per game. So this is clearly a team that can control the ball, but not so much that it can cover up for its atrocious defense. Can they win the NFC East with that? Sure. But there's never been an all-offense and no-defense team that has won the championship, either in football or, I believe, in any sport, come to think of it.
Right, and I'm just reading off the schedule here. We'll quickly go through this and then move on here. But it looks to me like, Andrew, that the Redskins may be off to a quicker start than you mentioned for last year. They were 3-6 heading towards the last portion of the season and ripped off 6 straight wins. Their first 5 opponents, 3 of them didn't even have a winning record. The Eagles, they face at home week 1, on the road for the Packers, and then home for the Lions, on the road against the Raiders, and then at the Cowboys. I think that's 3 to 4 wins right off the bat. You face the Bears, Broncos, and Chargers. That may be a tough stretch. But then you finish out with the Vikings, who, in my mind, they're sitting right at 500 again. And then you're on the road for the Eagles. Niners and Giants may be tough, but then you face a break against the Chiefs, on the road against the Falcons, then the Cowboys and the Giants. I believe that they may go off to an earlier start than last season, and that, to me, seems like 9 to 10 wins. Maybe 9 wins for this coming season, because frankly, you can put 2 in for the Eagles. They do play the Chargers, the Lions, the Raiders, and 2 of those 3 are at home. And then you play the Chiefs as well. That's also at home as well. So I think that there are some quality opponents that the Redskins are avoiding this year as far as schedule is concerned.
Well, you do make some good points, and they
did
finish first in their division last year, so they get the 2 toughest the 2 toughest, what do you call those? The non-common games?
Right.
Is everybody in the division
the
plays,
opposite conference, yeah.
One division, the opposite conference, obviously everybody in their own division, then one division in their own conference, and then the 2 non-common games. So they get the 2 toughest non-common games because they won the division last year, but I don't know, it'll certainly be interesting to see. I'm definitely going to keep my eyes out, keep tabs on the Redskins throughout the year, and I certainly hope they do well because I like rooting for RG3. I really do. I think he's definitely a class act and somebody who makes it very easy to get behind him.
Well, it's not very hard to talk about Robert Griffin III. We'll get to his debate in just a second, but the Redskins may indeed win that division, but then again, no team for the last 5 to 6 years, I believe, has won this NFC East back-to-back seasons. We'll see what happens in the NFC East, a wild division that always comes down to the last couple weeks. But the Robert Griffin debate, if indeed he's 100%, he may be a very healthy, viable option for that Redskin offense. We're going to move on to the top 100 players of 2013. We've debated this list for 3 weeks, and we're entering our final week where we split up the list into 25 players per countdown, and we're now down to numbers 25 through 1. We'll run down the final list, and in the middle, we'll stop and we'll take a look at what we believe seems to be too high of a ranking or too low of a ranking for the players that stop by in numbers 25 through 1. Andrew, are you ready?
Yeah. And just also for our viewing audience, don't forget to read the name of each player, just so anybody who may not have the list knows who we're talking about.
So we're going to start out with number 25, Rob Gronkowski. We're already going to take a pause because the guy who stopped at number 25 and was number 4 last year on the list may indeed just be quite a bit too high when we're looking at a guy that can't even stay on the field. And do you really believe that this is the best tight end in the game when guys like Jimmy Graham and other viable options are a lot better as far as injury is concerned in the NFL?
Well, I feel like injury plays a big part of it, and it would have played an even bigger part if they let the media or coaches or somebody who's more conscious of injuries decide, but this list was voted upon by players, and players are going to vote for certain groups of people and give them more weight, and one of those groups of people are ones who are just athletic freaks of nature that they're always going to remember playing against, the ones where, you know, they're kind of holding their hand over their head and saying, oh, how do I stop this guy? It seems impossible. Rob Gronkowski may have some injury issues, may have some partying issues and all that, but he is somebody that you'd remember playing against if you were defending him. And that's not something you can say about everybody or even most of the players on this list.
We're talking Rob Gronkowski being, when healthy, the greatest tight end I've seen in the last 5 years. He's a fantastic option for Tom Brady. Number 24, another fantastic option for a great quarterback, Marshawn Lynch. I think that's a fair marking at 24. Right. 23, we're looking at Andrew Luck in his height from the rookie season. He stops in at number 23. 22 is Larry Fitzgerald, a fair marking on the countdown.
Oh, by the way, on the Larry Fitzgerald one, I really have to applaud the players for that ranking. He's suffered statistically last year for a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with him. The players could have discounted him for that, but they didn't. That was a very, very smart rating. I had to give the players props on that one.
I think Reggie Wayne at 21 is a similar situation where he didn't flash with some amazing statistics, but he did get it done for the Colts. Stops in at number 21. 20 is Jamal Charles. He's a speed demon. He's a speed demon for sure, and definitely put up the statistics to prove it. But do you, Andrew, believe that he's that high on the ranking? We're looking at, outside of Arian Foster and Adrian Peterson, of course, then Ray Rice as well, the number 4 running back in the league.
I feel like at the very least, Marshawn Lynch should be over Jamal Charles. I feel like Lynch is more of a complete back. If you're defending against Jamal Charles, he's a very, very tough matchup, but if you're like sitting at home in a couple of months after the season's over, you're not really going to remember Jamal Charles. You're going to remember that time when Marshawn Lynch just shed like 6 tackles on his way to a 50-yard touchdown. And I feel like anybody who really watches football and really takes it in on a consistent basis would agree with me here that Marshawn Lynch is just the more complete player and the guy that if they're on opposite ends of a TV screen, if you have one half a screen showing a Jamal Charles run and one half showing a Marshawn Lynch run, your eyes are going to kind of gravitate towards the Marshawn Lynch run.
Absolutely.
So
You're looking
I feel like at the very least he should be number 5.
Yeah, Marshawn Lynch is definitely does a fantastic job at creating space and breaking tackles. Meanwhile, Jamal Charles, home run hitter. The offensive line does a fantastic job giving him room. I mean, nonetheless, the Chiefs, they drafted an offensive lineman in Eric Fisher, but this was still a very good offensive line unit. And Jamal Charles consistently had some pretty nice holes running the football. So, I mean, obviously the speed complements a great offensive line. Jamal Charles is still in the top 100, but definitely deserves a knockdown, or at least Marshawn Lynch needs to take a step up. Joe Flacco, another guy, I believe the height may have gotten to the Super Bowl champion. I think Flacco's still a very good quarterback, but there are some very productive QBs that are behind Joe Flacco on this list. I mean, just take a quick stop at the guys below him. We're looking at, for the next QB on the list, Eli Manning. Is Joe Flacco 23 spots ahead of Eli Manning? 24 spots ahead of the Giants quarterback, a guy that's won 2 Super Bowls now. I disagree, Andrew. Do you think I'm the same way?
I'm thinking the same way, too. I feel like Flacco should have been much lower and Manning should have been higher. I feel like when it gets right down to it, Manning's the better player. And if you replayed the playoffs 100 times, the same scenario might unfold only a couple of those times. So, Flacco, great player, legendary postseason performance, but I would need to see it from him again before I think about putting him in the top 20. But I have a much bigger gripe with number 18 on this list, Ed Reed.
Absolutely. If anyone has heard for the previous shows, we've harped on this again and again about the top 100 players list. Time and time again, it seems like the career production of players such as Ed Reed seem to overshadow what players' view of a certain guy on this list based off of career production more than what they will produce for their team in this coming season.
It's kind of like how in baseball, Derek Jeter is grandfathered into every All-Star game no matter how he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, the baseball, though, if we can go quick into that, they just don't seem to have as good of a job creating an all-star lineup. It's basically a place where fans can stuff the ballot and where they can basically determine who's going in and out based off of who they want and how much votes they can plug into that ballot, basically. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, the NFL does a better job, and as players are concerned, they do a pretty nice job determining this list. But with number 18, way too high based off of career production. And as far as number 17 goes, Matt Ryan, I think that's closer to an accurate prediction for the Falcon quarterback. But then again, he has yet to win more than one playoff game, so I don't want to put number 17 yet for the Falcon QB. I may be a little hesitant and base my prediction solely on playoff rankings, but, I mean, it's no surprise that the QBs that are higher on this list, all of them have won consistently in the playoffs except for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like Matt Ryan. I defended him a lot over the course of this season when around week 12, week 13, everybody started saying that the Falcons were overrated, which is true, but they started kind of really harping on Matt Ryan to the point where he became underrated, and I feel like he submitted a really great performance in the playoffs, and the Atlanta defense really just couldn't close out the Niners in the conference championship game, but you can penalize Matt Ryan for only winning a single playoff game, but on the other hand, he's had some bad hands. There's been an unfortunate set of circumstances that surrounded him that very easily could have surrounded Eli Manning or could have surrounded Joe Flacco, but they didn't.
Absolutely. So this coming couple of years will definitely prove more of the story behind number 17. 16, a very good spot on the countdown, A.J. Green. He's becoming one of the greatest receivers right now in the game, a very viable spot. Way too high for number 15, Robert Griffin III, quarterback for the Redskins. I just think the hype is too much for a guy that, frankly, can't stay on the field.
Well, once again, it's the freak of nature test coming into play because defenders, it's everybody who's voting for this, whether it be defenders, guys on the linebacking core, guys in the offensive line, etc., they're letting a couple of key questions overshadow RG3's ability. Like, for instance, would you want him as a teammate? Yes, probably over almost anybody in the league. Who's the most frustrating player to defend against? RG3, almost out of any player in the league. Who did you not want to play with 3 or 4 games left? The Washington Redskins. So there are a lot of things that kind of artificially inflated his stock on this list, and it kind of got in the way of what he could truly do. I feel like this was a ranking that's based more on potential than it is in reality. I feel like he could get there in a year or two. I feel like he could get in the top 10 in a year or two if everything stays okay with his ACL, but I don't think he deserves this spot now.
Oh, Robert Griffin, definitely the wow factor. Number 14, Andre Johnson, another guy, a wow player, a good spot on the list. 13 is Ray Rice. I think that's a little bit too high, but then again...
Definitely too high.
Yeah, I mean...
Any running back where Bernard Pierce is stealing your carries, I mean, no disrespect to Bernard Pierce. He's a very good backup running back, but if you're number 13, the third guy on this list, then you shouldn't be marginalized in your offensive system.
You should be a wow. Yeah. The fourth and 29 definitely plays into one play. Wowing the players definitely bumps you up the list when he frankly didn't really make that many plays this year.
Right.
And his yards per carry, I think, was under 4, as a matter of fact, even with a very good offensive line. Maybe we can get those stats real quick. Ray Rice, number 13 on this list, the third running back on this countdown. And he averages 4.5 for his career, but in this season he wasn't anything more than just a marginal player. Number 12 on this list, though, I could argue is a little bit too low, but still a very great player for the Cowboys, DeMarcus Ware. Do you agree with that placement?
I feel like that's the proper placement. DeMarcus Ware is obviously a very, very good player, one of the best linebackers in the league, but I feel like the players didn't get carried away. They put him in the top 20 where he deserves to be, but he wasn't leapfrogging Drew Brees. He wasn't going to go over Aaron Rodgers or anything crazy like that. I feel like this was the correct place for him.
So number 12, I think, is a solid place, but I think he needs to trade places with number 9, Von Miller. I think that overall, run versus the run and versus the pass, I think D. Ware is a better place. But then again, both of those guys should definitely be in the top 15, and they are. Number 11 is Drew Brees, a solid placement. I think that's a very fair spot for him, along with Patrick Willis at number 10. So it goes Ware for 12, Brees 11.
Nick, I've got the Ray Rice yards per carry stats. He had 4.4.
4.4. I mean, below his career average, and he gets bumped up on this list to number 13. And then, as we continue here on this list, number 8 is Arian Foster, another solid placement on the list. He improved from 17 last year to number 9, and I think overall, Arian Foster, despite that being a passing team, the Texans are, I think Arian Foster, second running back in the league, I think that's a good spot for him.
Yeah, I do too. Arian Foster, fantastic one-cut running back. He has great vision, probably the best vision out of anybody in the league. And I feel like this is another player that was properly rated.
Number 7 is going to be Aldon Smith, proper placement there. Number 6 is going to be Aaron Rodgers, another solid place. And you can argue for number 5, perhaps a little bit too low for the Defensive Player of the Year, but he was the top-ranked top-rated defensive player on this countdown at number 5. J.J. Watt.
J.J. Watt should be number 4.
Right.
Tom Brady or
he should.
Peyton Manning.
Yeah. We will give you our top 10 list here in just a second, but obviously the top 5 is right around where it should be. 5 is Watt, 4 is Brady, 3 is Calvin Johnson, 2 is Peyton Manning, and 1 is Adrian Peterson. Before we get to our top 10, I'll give you, Andrew, a quick minute to go over that. What do you think? What are your reactions as far as this list, especially when it first came out? Your thoughts of where the players were placed and the overall countdown from 1 to 100.
Well, I feel like obviously there were some missteps, and I had my players and rankings that I liked and didn't like. You had yours, and I'm sure everybody else had theirs. But ultimately, putting together a list from 1 to 100 is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it requires a real thinking man and a high level of football intelligence to even attempt to do this in some kind of educated fashion. So, as much as we may gripe about some of the rankings, I do have to give the players who assembled this list a lot of credit. They really took their knowledge and used it in a way to make the fans see more of the game than they would have otherwise. They get to see a player's perspective. They get to make inferences like, oh, this guy put him there because he doesn't like defending him, etc., etc. And ultimately, I think that the football world and NFL Network is a better place with the top 100 list than without it.
Many can debate, and the fact that people have debated definitely creates drama for the offseason and just a cool countdown to look at throughout the months of May and June when it's just brutally silent around the National Football League. But definitely this is a great thing for the National Football League. Definitely creates a lot of intrigue and shows, frankly, who the players respect and who the players really don't around the NFL. Because at the end of the day, this is a list based off of talent, but partially based off of popularity. And we saw some guys woefully under or overplaced just based off of either career hype or what they have done in the last season or just the character. I mean, there's a variety of factors, but this top 100 list is just about what I believe is an accurate countdown. There are some missteps, but I'll give you a chance, Andrew, but my belief on the numbers 1 through 10 should be as follows. Obviously, I think Adrian Peterson at number 1 is a fantastic spot for a Viking team that is basically Adrian Peterson and then really just the defensive line. Other than that, there's nothing that the Vikings have outside of number 21. Outside of AP, I think Calvin Johnson, who set the single-season record, should be number 2. Then J.J. Watt should stop in at number 3. Aaron Rodgers at number 4. Then Aldon Smith, a very good pass rusher, should stop in at number 5. Then Tom Brady should be number 6. Maybe we're going to put in a DeMarcus Ware at 7. I just love the way that he rushes the passer. Number 8, we can put Peyton Manning there. Just a guy that doesn't really have the postseason success, and I don't want to have a guy too high when he can't even win in the postseason. Number 9, Ariel Jeremiah Green, a guy that's going to become perhaps the top, if not the number 2 wide receiver in the NFL next season. And the number 10, a guy that sometimes is underrated, but really, if given the quarterback, can become also another great receiver. That's Larry Fitzgerald. I'm going to put him at number 10. Notable mention would be Patrick Willis, a really good linebacker for the Niners. Andrew, what would be your top 10?
Well, for me, what I'm looking for in my top players is not only were you really good, were you the best player, but how much better were you than your peers? Am I going to remember you in 20 or 30 years? Am I going to be telling my kids stories about watching you play? And this is how I came up with the top 10 as follows. Number 1, Adrian Peterson. We agree there. Number 2, Calvin Johnson. Number 3, J.J. Watt. And I'm surprised we agree there because a lot of people would take Peyton Manning or take Tom Brady and put him over Watt.
I just don't agree with the fact that they've somewhat declined as players. Maybe number 2 or 3 as far as top of 2000s, but 2013, not the case.
Yeah, J.J. Watt was simply more dominant than any defensive player who lined up in the 2013 season. It's not even close. J.J. Watt was just a transcendent force that we haven't seen before and we may not see again. That might have been one of the best defensive seasons that we've ever witnessed. It's just really undescribable. He's probably one of my favorite players. I have no problem with him being a 3. Number 4, I would probably put Tom Brady because he was doing it without a deep threat last season. Brandon Lloyd didn't quite pan out. He was operating an offense that requires a ridiculously high level of football IQ to operate. He was he was shifting people around at the line. He was conducting that no-huddle attack just extremely, extremely well. So for that, and just for the sheer degree of difficulty that he faced, I'm putting him at number 4. Number 5, I'd put Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't change his ranking too much. I'd just bump him up one spot. 6, I would put probably Peyton Manning because I don't want to discount anything that he's done. He had a fantastic comeback. It was really an amazing story. And I feel like it would be a disservice to him to put him any lower than 6 or 7. Then after that, I'm fine with how the current countdown has.
It's just a drop off from there.
Like Smith, Foster, Miller, Willis.
Right. One thing we can add on before we move on here, obviously the top 100 players creates huge controversy. But as far as our quarterback countdown goes, Andrew has it as Brady, then Rodgers, then Manning as the 1, 2, 3 greatest quarterbacks for this coming season. Me, on the other hand, I like to put Aaron Rodgers ahead of Brady, and then Manning is the number 3, based off of solely the fact that he doesn't have an offensive line and didn't really have much of a running game last season. And still, the Packers, I believe, out of the 3 teams, I believe that they were in the top 5 of offense, and they were a very good passing team despite who was their receiver outside of Greg Jennings. Outside of Jordy Nelson. I mean, Jennings was facing injury problems. You had the resurgence of Randall Cobb, but you aren't throwing to any huge receivers like
Jones also.
You could argue that, but I mean, he isn't going to make massive production. Brady has a security blanket in Wes Welker, and Manning has 2 security blankets in Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker. Aaron Rodgers, frankly, he had a bunch of guys that were good, not great.
Well, I feel like what influenced the rankings for me, and it's kind of unfair because it didn't have a lot to do with Rodgers, was how often he got sacked last season.
Right.
Like, he had a poor offensive line. He ran into some bad luck Sundays. He didn't have a ton of time to get the ball off. You know, if you switch Tom Brady with Aaron Rodgers, if you switch their offensive lines and their wide receivers, I would probably be putting Rodgers ahead of Brady. But
a lot of ifs, right. Yeah. I just don't agree with what the Packers did this offseason. And then you add the fact that Bulaga out for the season with, I believe it was an ACL injury, and you're looking at an offensive line that is the same, if not worse, talent-wise than last season. And they gave up a season record 52 sacks. I don't think that the Packers are going to make that big bounce with those 2 running backs if on the offensive line you aren't improving in perhaps the most important offensive category. I mean, I know I harp on you about offensive line, Andrew, but to some extent that is the most important position outside of quarterback on offense. I can deal with the lack of a receiving core. The Patriots have done it for a decade. Tight ends, I'm sure they may be transcendent, but I would rather have a great offensive line than an all-star running back or an all-star tight end. I just think that the Packers are in a huge dilemma here with the injury and with no talent surrounding an all-star quarterback.
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you saw this video, but the Packers beat writers picked it up and got circulated around and eventually ended up on Deadspin, Bleacher Report, stuff like that. There were several instances of fights breaking out at the Packers training camp a week or 2 ago, and this isn't like the normal pushing and shoving for a couple seconds and then we're done usual fare. These were like actual fist fights that broke out 3 or 4 times that had to be just forcibly separated by dozens of teammates. And this happened with some frequency at Packers practice a week or 2 ago. So
if you add in,
have to wonder whether this
right.
is a bad sign.
You can never question Rodgers' lack of leadership. He's still the man of the locker room, but it's just hard to see the Packers making a jump, especially in that division where you know the Bears are going to put up 9 or 10 wins. The Lions seem to be a better team. And then it just seems that with all
Vikings have AP,
and the Vikings
that
too,
go off at any time.
9 or 10 wins there too. I just think that the Packers, when you're treading water in the NFL, you're going backwards. I just don't put the Cowboys as the winner of that division because when you're not getting better, you're just, for lack of a better word, you're just getting worse. If you're not improving, then then you just are accustomed to being mediocre in that locker room. I think that since the Packers and the Cowboys aren't necessarily improving through the offseason and through what they're doing throughout their campaign, it just, to me, seems like these are two teams that are treading water in the NFL.
Well, I disagree with you. I'm going with the other approach, which is if you're not improving and you're not getting worse, that means you're stagnant. You're not doing anything. And that means you're subject to the up and down trends of the teams around you. And going back to the Cowboys for just a quick second, my argument for them is, yeah, maybe they haven't improved or regressed, but you can make an argument that everybody around them has regressed. And the Packers, you can make the argument that they are getting worse in very easily observable ways. You mentioned the injury to Bulaga. I mentioned the fights breaking out at practice. I feel like the Packers and the Cowboys really aren't comparable.
And they're relying also on Randall Cobb having a breakout year. I don't know if that's going to be the case.
He had his breakout year.
He
I
did.
think he had double-digit touchdowns.
He did. He came in on the second half of the year. But to be honest, this is a debate that can go on and on. But you mentioned the rest of the NFC East regressing. That may push the Cowboys up. And the rest of the NFC North, getting better, which may push the Packers down. In the coming weeks, we will definitely see just how these teams will fare once regular season action begins. I was excited for the preseason for a quick minute, Andrew, and then all of a sudden, I'm just so anxious for that regular season to begin, and we still have 3 more weeks of exhibition action. And your takeaway through week number 1, I know we mentioned this for a quick second earlier with a couple quarterback battles, but your takeaway overall, I know you're very conscious around Jets camp, but not only in that division, but also in that conference, the AFC. What is your takeaway from week 1 and who you believe are improving as a football team, and a couple teams that are regressing now that we have seen the lights shine on these teams through preseason week number 1?
Well, I feel like you can't really make any conclusions solely from preseason week 1 because it resembles real regular season football on the surface only. Like, coordinators don't use the plans that they're going to use. Everything's a lot less complicated, etc., etc. But judging from off-season draft, things that we've had months to break down, I feel like a team that could be on the rise, you have to look at... You know what? I was going to try and come up with someone else, but screw it. The Cleveland Browns!
Oh.
Cleveland! Yes. And I feel like my argument with them isn't so much that they're a good team. It's that the AFC is so weak this year that it opens the door for a mediocre team to make it into the playoffs. And I feel like the Browns are the best out of that group that involves the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Jaguars, etc. I feel like they're going to win a bunch of ugly 10-7 games. They're going to win games by 3 or 4 points a bunch of times. And I think they're going to make it in. I really do.
This was the youngest roster in the NFL last season, so just that alone, they've improved more than every other team, and the fact that they're just such an inexperienced ball club.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is your other team?
My other team, and this is a team I think is going to be on the downturn or the downtrend a little bit. I feel like the New England Patriots are going to be finally going on the outs. Because I'm afraid to say it. I'm afraid to question Tom Brady. I'm afraid to question Bill Belichick because they have a way of throwing it back in your face. But I don't see how the Patriots can keep achieving first-round byes, can keep achieving 12-4, 13-3 records with so much of their team gone. I mean, they had to readjust their scheme because of Gronkowski being hurt, because of Hernandez being gone, because of losing Wes Welker and Tom Brady losing familiarity with a lot of the receivers he had developed a rapport with. And by the way, Tom Brady not getting any younger. He's in his late 30s now, or mid to late 30s. The secondary still isn't any better. Like I said, it's a logical prediction, but I'm really afraid to make it because it's not a good idea to question a Hall of Fame coach and a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Right, it's just offensively, their receiving corps is really something to question. But you mentioned teams on the downfall and teams on the rise. So I don't want to take your selections. Both of those I agree with. They are clear-cut guys on the rise and fall. I just don't see the Patriots being as good as they were last year. I think it was 11 wins for that team, if I'm not mistaken, for the 2012 campaign. But a team on the rise, and this is a ball club that was at the bottom of the abyss, the number 2 overall selection in the draft. I just think that the Jaguars, through their moves through in the draft and then free agency, I think the Jaguars are better, but the quarterback position is still really bad for this team. But I just think that this team, it's a young club, and I think it's getting a little bit better. Sure, the Jaguars may still not win very many games, but I just think that the Jaguars are, talent-wise, are getting a little bit better. Them and the Chiefs, the same way. You're at the bottom of the abyss, but talent-wise, I think they are getting better. That offensive line for the Jags, a whole lot better now that you plug in Luke Jokel, who in my mind is the best tackle or the best player in the draft, better than Eric Fisher. And then a team that is on the fall, definitely a tough scenario to have. There's a lot of teams in that AFC that are very good heading into this season. But I am going to take a look.
What about the Ravens?
The Ravens, I don't think that they are all that much worse than last year because they made a lot of acquisitions, including Ed Reed, that solidify the losses that they had. Sure, their middle linebacker unit, or linebacker unit in general, is going to take a hit with Ray Lewis gone, leadership as well. But defensively, adding Chris Canty, offensive side, Dennis Pitta, it's a lot of free agents. They're just going to be, in my mind, they're going to be a team that is right near where they were last year. But a team that's on the fall, that's a hard situation to think of. There's a lot of teams that are either stagnant or I just don't see very much out of them.
What about the Steelers?
But
they've gotten pretty old.
They have, but Roethlisberger, if healthy, does improve that ball club.